Well, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night to you. It is Thursday, the 11th of April, 2024. This is Paul English Live, episode, I see, number 32, according to my numbering. Lovely day here on the south coast of England. We're here on WBN 324 every Thursday at 8 p.m. in the UK, 3 p.m. in the US. Welcome to the show. Back everyone. Thursday rolls around pretty quick, doesn't it? I suppose every day rolls around pretty quick these days. And it's a bit of a grab bag of a show tonight. I've just got a lot of stuff lined up and it's just a matter of getting it all in the right order. Can it be done? Probably not. Few tunes, I hope. Well, I've got a couple lined up, and we might get a few B mixes along the way as we go. A big shout out to everybody on Global Voice Network who's tuning in on Rumble and, of course, on WBN 324. Got a couple of different streaming arrangements for tonight, so I hope it's working okay. I think signal's coming through fine to Rumble and D Live. If it isn't, just give me a shout out, and if you want to participate in the chat, please head on over to the Rumble room. You'll find the link to that over at paulenglishllive.com. Drum roll, it's the cue. So the cue for me to stop the music, lower it down and start saying intelligent things. So hi, welcome to the show. We'll try and say a few intelligent things tonight. I should be joined by Paul B, as I said, a little bit later on at some point throughout the show. But I've got quite a few things lined up. This is a slightly different show this week. Of course, the last couple of months we've had a guest on every week, and I decided to not try and put the effort in. Actually, the decision was taken out of my hands. I've literally been flat out working so many hours. I've just not even had a chance. I did actually had a great chat with someone over the weekend, just gone, but this Thursday is a little bit too soon. But in the next month or so, one or two interesting people lined up to come on. But today, it's me as an interesting people and you, dear people in the chat. So a big shout out to everybody in the chat. Someone's actually just put a question up that says, out of interest, how come Paul's show is not on Speak Free Radio? We're just restructuring things a little bit. It's probably going to go as a replay later on or earlier on in the week because there's some scheduling changes taking place there. And also from a technical point of view, it's, as you can possibly tell, for me, it's been quite a challenge. Now, what actually happens, or what has been happening, is I have to monitor about 4 or 5 things at the start of the show, and some of you will have got used to the fact that I don't do that very well. So it's a little bit easier for me tonight. Although famous last words, it's all still got plenty of chance to go very, very pear-shaped indeed. Topics for discussion today. Well, I've got all sorts of little clips lined up, as I mentioned. One of the things that that I've not been able to get round to actually playing, this is the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think with Eli, and the previous week with, it might have been Thomas Anderson, I can't remember. I had some clips lined up about CO2. You know that stuff? Carbon dioxide, that kind of stuff, and the climate nonsense that's taking place. There's quite a bit of it. So I wanted to start off really talking about the climate. I've even got a little song about coal coming up later on. Yeah, for all you coal song fans. And also, just to put it out to you that after we're through the sort of early part of the show, you want to call in, you can. The best way to do it, actually there's only one way to do it. If you head on over to paulenglishlive.com, there is a link at the bottom where you can come into the studio. So I'm generally watching that. You probably need a headset, or at least something where we don't get echo. Those of you that have tuned in recently will know that some people call in and we have to sort of deal with the echo thing, which is always a bit of a pain. I wish I had a screen or a kind of an audio screening type person to deal with that, but my budget doesn't stretch to that just yet. So there we go. That's kind of the format for tonight. Right, this climate stuff. Is anybody familiar with somebody called John Kerry? It's worrying if you are, isn't it? I want to play you something that this... insert your own adjectives. What should we call him? A bastion of wisdom? No, we shouldn't call him that. This bumbling oaf of the world stage? We're getting a bit closer. How about a person who communicates things that are not true? Here's one. Get your lug-holes around this. This is for about a minute. This is John Kerry saying that the climate's killing us. Yeah, that's right. Here we go. Oh, I know what's happened there. I am just the world's worst at this stuff, aren't I? Am I not the world's worst? Let me just get this back on again. Right, there we go. See, what happens is, right at the beginning of the show, live's always great, isn't it? John Kerry, who's nearly as big an idiot as me. Here we go.
There's really no polite way to put it. The climate crisis is killing people. It is knowingly, wittingly allowing people to die and infecting them with disease and providing them with air that kills people because we're not willing to take the steps necessary to do what we know we need to do. And what people have been screaming about for 30 years, 35 years plus now. Many of us were in Rio. I was there in 1988 when Jim Hansen first testified to us about what is happening. And every year now, millions of people around this planet are dying because fossil fuel and methane emissions, called greenhouse gas pollution, not just gas, pollution. And we used to care about pollution. We used to apply a polluter pays principle to the concept of pollution. But now those methane emissions and CO2 emissions and nitrous oxide and other emissions are escaping into the atmosphere, being fed by the way in which we continue to choose to fuel our vehicles, propel our vehicles, heat our homes, light our factories, and so forth.
And so the question regarding that clip is spot the fact, because I didn't. Kerry, of course, is one of these mealy-mouthed, mediocre people that's been strutting around the world stage talking guff for decades, and that clip is relatively recent, maybe within the last year or so, but I came across it. I was just sort of amazed by his conviction in something that's literally nonsense, I would suggest. Of course, me using such strident language doesn't help. We're all supposed to be very, very reasonable and stroke our chins and say, well, you know, he might possibly have a point. But my next clip would probably undermine that a little bit. I want to play you this. This is from an interview with a professor. I'll dig his name up after the clip, I think, if I can find it. I've got it somewhere. I think it's an Australian TV thing, talking about carbon dioxide. Hi, Paul. Hello. Oh,
well, while you're sorting out that clip, can I clarify something?
Yes.
I don't know if I heard him right. Did he say the climate crisis was killing people, or the COVID crisis was killing people, or the glyphosate crisis was killing people, or the genetically modified food crisis was killing people, or the chemtrails were killing people? What was he saying there?
I think you need to be a scriptwriter. He'd value someone like you. Just keep piling them in. He could do a speech at all these different conventions about COVID, the climate, all of this stuff. Yeah, it was very, very pear-shaped and banana-shaped what he was talking about this then. It really was.
Well, I just think it was interesting that he mentioned carbon dioxide, that which plants through photosynthesis use to create oxygen, which actually supports life, not harms it.
Are you a troublemaker?
This guy's
Paul?
off his nut.
I don't think he's got one. I think his head's held on by staples, baling wire, and glue. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up carbon dioxide. Because I think I might have mentioned earlier on in the week that we need to talk a lot to really put a lot of hot air out into the world and fill it up with carbon dioxide. And of course, the climate worriers will go, no, there's too much. Well, listen to this. This is from Professor somebody or other from... I'll find his name in a second after the clip. This is a bit of a rebuttal to what Kerry just said. I do like this so very much. And it's very much in line, Paul, with what you've just said. Here we go.
Professor Happer, I want to pick you up on something you said just a moment ago. I think you said we're in a CO2 famine. Now, the way I understand things is the problem is the Industrial Revolution. We've been pumping all this CO2 into the atmosphere. The way I've understood it, there's never been more CO2 in the atmosphere. That's the problem. But are you implying that there was more CO2 in the atmosphere prior to Industrial Revolution times?
Oh, yes, since the Cambrian explosion of life that we can measure with good fossils, that was maybe 500 billion years ago, CO2 levels have gone way down. You know, they've typically been 3, 4, 5 times what they are now, and plants are adapted to much higher levels. And so they're harmed in a number of ways by the low levels now. They're particularly sensitive to drought, for example. They didn't used to be so sensitive to drought. And there's a more subtle problem. They have it turns out that the enzyme they use is poisoned by oxygen if there's not enough CO2. So plants have to devote a lot of their resources to detoxifying this oxygen poisoning. If you double CO2, they don't have to work as hard to protect themselves from oxygen.
Well, how about that? Now let me tell you who that was. That was the Emeritus Professor of Physics at Princeton University, a gentleman called William Happer, Happer. And what he said made me very happy, so thank you, Mr. Happer. Just to quote back, he says, CO2 levels have gone way down. They've typically been 3, 4, or 5 times what they are now, and plants are adapted to much higher levels of CO2, and so they are harmed in a number of ways by the low levels that we are having to deal with right now. So, I like Emeritus Professor Happer, and I find John Kerry very funny. Really, to quote an oft-quoted comedian over here, there's only really one way to find out who's right, and that's that they've got to have a fight, Paul. I think they need to have a fight. And that would be the best. Although the professor, of course, he's kind of won it with the facts. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think Kerry needs to, take a nosedive into a big old vat of ketchup, and he might come out, might not. Just depends on how thick it is, I guess. But the whole climate change. I mean, remember when the good old days when they used to call it global warming? But they don't call it global warming anymore because somebody actually paid attention and actually tracked the temperature. And they found out that it wasn't really warming. It was like cooling. So that, we can't call it global cooling because that completely goes against the global warming. But we can call it climate change and they'll never know the difference. And it's all madness. It's madness.
Yes, it is. It's absolute madness. I mean, climate change is, yes. I mean, it's spring right now here in England, and it's probably spring where you are too, Paul. Is it spring where you are as well? So it's spring, right? And if there's one way that you would describe spring, it's a permanent state of climate change. I mean, it's just... It's a very
climate...
Yeah, it's changing.
Climate change happens 4 times a year.
It does. It does in terms of its seasons. The thing about spring over here, my dad used to say this, up north, it was actually, the weather was more rambunctious up north than it is down here, more turbulent. It really was very changeable. And he said you could stand on a street corner somewhere in the spring up north, and you'd get just about every weather condition in 15, 20 minutes. And you would. I remember it hailing, then getting foggy, then the wind picked up, and then the sun came out, and it finished off by raining again. It's just... So that's quite a bit of climate change. Is that what John Kerry's really upset about? Is he really upset about the sun coming out, then going behind a cloud? Because that's changing all the time. This is the usual tactic of hijacking words and infusing into them some kind of anxiety, which is now, transmitted to people because it's just been pummeled into them for years. This whole thing of the climate's changing. Yes, and... I remember, I've probably said this before, but I've got to say it again. I had a good friend years ago, this is about 7 or 8 years ago now, who very much is into the idea that the climate's changing and we're out of control and we horrible, evil human beings are responsible for all of it, which of course complete nonsense. Although I think human beings like Kerry are responsible for something which is worse than climate change. They're involved in changing the climate of people's thinking so that it becomes, well, non-thinking really, but... he was always banging on to me about the fact that, everything's warming up and it's terrible. And I read him out, and I've been looking for it since. I've got it on one computer that I must have discarded 5 or 6 years ago, and it's on the hard drive there. And you know what it's like when you get a new machine. You never move enough files across, and then one day you go, where's that thing? But I read a newspaper article to him from the New York Times, I think it was. And the gist of it was pretty much what you've heard before. It said temperatures going up. Sea levels rising, the polar ice caps are melting. At the North Pole, they've melted so much that the little polar bears, and the big ones too, they're pretty huge, aren't they? The polar bears are scrabbling around, swimming, having a real rough old time of it, trying to find a solid piece of ice and blah, 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 blah. And I'm reading this out to him. And of course, he was getting quite excited. I said, "You mean something like this?" And I read it to him. He said, "Yeah, that's exactly what's going on." I said, "I'm sorry, but I've played a terrible joke on you." I said, I'll send you the article. It's a genuine article. I said, "The problem that you've got is that it appeared in 1919. It was an edition of the New York Times from 1919. This stuff has been banging on for years. I often thought it was just basically had a slow news day, so write about the weather, but in a really scary way. That'll, maybe that'll fill a few more column inches up. And I want to dovetail over to my last little clip now because it's, well, not that I'm going to stop talking about this, but a clip that's really relevant. You're probably familiar with a gentleman called Paul Harvey, yeah? Another Paul. They're everywhere.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Okay. So Paul Harvey shuffled off this model coil a couple of decades ago, I think, but he was legendary in the world of US radio. He used to do these short 3 and 4 minute little vignettes called the rest of the story, I think it was called. They're quite wonderful. This is him at a dinner. He's giving this is a little bit longer, but I want to play it anyway. This is from 1992, so we're talking 32 years ago. He's at one of these dinners, where they talk to everybody that's rich and famous. But listen to what he had to say back then. This is so apt.
Barely a week goes by, but what some researcher tries to scare us or trick us out of research money by claiming that the sky is falling. And with the willing complicity of headline-hungry media, a recent crisis of the month had to do with global warming. An ozone hole is opening up over the United States, we were told, the effects of which were already measurable in an increase in skin cancer. On the contrary, destroying chlorine around the polar vortex has been declining since January. A major objective of a recent shuttle mission was to determine the scope and scale of the so-called ozone hole, and the silence since has been deafening from those whose livelihood depends on creating crises. Recent data from the Upper Atmosphere Research Satellites affirms that any problem is less, it's not greater. Ozone levels fluctuate all of the time, partly because of volcanic activity and solar flares. But MIT's Technology Review has made an exhaustive study of worldwide ocean temperatures since 1851 has concluded that there appears to have been little or no global warming over the past century. In fact, the net rise in world surface temperature during the last century, which was about 1%, almost all occurred before 1940, and that was before aerosols, and that has since been reversed. Former NASA chief Robert Jastrow and former Scripps director William Nierenberg, past president of the American Academy of Sciences, Frederick Seitz, all have concluded in a scathing rebuke of those who make money by predicting global warming, quote, if we allow ourselves to be influenced by press release, we could spend $1 trillion over the next decade destroying what's left of the American economy in an utterly unnecessary attempt to repeal the Industrial Revolution.
Bring back Paul Harvey. How about that?
He's just a conspiracy theorist.
Well, why is that not played on the news every night of the week, right? You know.
Because it doesn't fit the narrative.
No, and I tell you what, it reminded me of the hole in the ozone layer. That was one of the ones, wasn't it? That's gone down the old memory hole. What's happened to the hole in the ozone layer? I've got to, the sky's falling. We've got to have things to panic about. But that's 32 years ago.
No. There's many more holes in the ozone layer now than there ever were before, but they weren't created by poofy hairstyles and hairspray. They were burned in the atmosphere by HAARP, by focusing millions of watts of radio wave energy on the ionosphere, forcing it to heat and rise, creating artificial low pressure centers that steer winds and steer Arctic air to collide with Gulf air to create tornadoes and all kinds of nasty things in the middle of the country, to stop rain or create rain, all based on who's got the right thickness of checkbook and who's willing to write a big enough number to get him to spray a bunch of stuff in the air that we're breathing. That's what chemtrails are all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The ozone layer is still holy. It is as holy as any Bible ever written. But they did it.
Yeah, I always remember reading that thing about the Russians exploding. Didn't they fire atomic bombs up into when was this, in the 50s or the 60s? And they blew them up in the atmosphere.
Of course they did. The flat earthers are trying to say that they're trying to blow a hole in the firmament. But if you look at the Bible, it says God created a firmament to separate the waters from the waters. So what are they going to do when they blow a hole in what's keeping out the water? They better know how to dog paddle.
I know. I think the water fell a long time ago on that one. I do. With the collapse of things. I mean, didn't we talk about this a couple of weeks ago? I can't remember who I was talking. Maybe it was with Mr. Anderson. It was actually talking about the air pressure. There's an idea, more than an idea, that the air pressure on the Earth was much, much higher in the past than it is now because of this firmament of water that basically acted as a way of also protecting us, or our ancient forefathers, or whatever they were, from the harm of ultraviolet rays. And this is why you've got all this thing with giants, these huge people, because it apparently was a very oxygen-rich atmosphere, which humans like, and I guess they get to breathe out a lot of other stuff. And the plants were putting out, dealing with the CO2 and all this kind of stuff and just whacking out oxygen. So the whole thing was bigger. Everything was bigger. People were bigger. Animals were bigger. Sharks were massive. They found them 50 million years ago or something like that. So all of these things get linked. And coming back to when does he said that? 1992, I said. That's the date on the clip from Paul Harvey. And someone mentioned in the chat that his If I Were the Devil, that wonderful poem that he read out years ago, maybe I'll dig it up throughout the show. We can maybe play that a little bit later on. That's fantastic as well. But 1992. Now the Berlin Wall came down about Was it 1990? I think it was, wasn't it? The Berlin Wall came down. And I think that that's pivotal to this escalation of the climate scam, the climate hullabaloo, because those international communists in Russia suddenly had all their toys taken away from them. They couldn't go around, in the skirt tails of Russia pushing their agenda for global communism, because I still think that's the best word to describe what we're enduring right now, for the simple reason that it connects us with all these great people who've fought against communism, certainly in the last century, and a necessary fight against a very unnecessary evil, which is, obviously the plaything of imbeciles and people who are bored out of their minds or something like that. But what happened with many of those people, is it's a known fact that many of them, these international communist types, sulking, or maybe it's all part of a plan. One of the plans is, we'll pretend it's collapsed, but they went off into the environmental movement. This is a known thing. And they said, well, what we can do, and this agenda's running through what Kerry said as well, all of these things, is we're going to make the enemy, human beings are going to become the enemy of the environment. By taking this approach, we can form these supranational organizations and extend their power, like the World Health Organization and all these other ones, which I can't be bothered to remember or think about at all, because they're all just variants of the same scheme. And what we're going to do is we're going to make the people feel that they are the polluters. They're the ones causing all the trouble on the earth by their very existence, and therefore they need to come to us, the fantastically wise leaders, because we say we are, and we're going to put this problem right. A problem, of course, which doesn't exist, because nature works things out way, way better than any scientist with a chemistry set has ever been able to do. And I'm not trying to be insulting them. They've done some amazing things. But this movement is obviously a political movement and nothing else. And the science goes out of the window when the checkbooks come out. That's basically the case of it, don't you think, Paul?
Yeah. Well, the checkbooks drive the science.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, you know what? I think the checkbook's driving the science, and the phrase "trust the science" has probably had something to do with "in God we trust," because it was talking about the money, and the money goes to the science, and then changes everything that science reports as fact, and it's really not. It's, I don't know. Anyway, Paul Harvey's "If I Were the Devil," it's in your Skype.
See, I just have to snap my fingers like this.
That's one of my
turns up.
favorites.
We'll run that a little bit later, I think. Yeah, we'll run that a little bit later, because it might patch in with some other themes. I said I had a little song about coal,
of course,
and it's worth putting this in. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's called "People Will Always Need Coal." I bet you didn't think people would write songs like that within recent living memory. And they did. This is a recent song, right? "People Will Always Need Coal," by an outfit called Public Service Broadcasting. That's their name. And they mix historical facts up with kind of modern music. I'm not going to play all of it, but I just want to play the first sort of 40 seconds of it, just to give you an idea, because there's a little voiceover in there that's very interesting. Listen to this.
Over 2.5 feet thick, there is still at least 10,000 million tons of the coal that made her famous. Enough for another 400 years.
Hang on, what did he just say? Let's listen to that bit again. Here we go. Last 15 seconds.
South Wales, in seams over 2.5 feet thick, there is still at least 10,000 million tons of the coal that made her famous. Enough for another 400 years.
enough for another 400 years. So some people, of course, frown upon coal. They say it's terrible, awful stuff. Maybe it is terrible, awful stuff. It certainly was terribly awful and difficult to get it out of the ground by those tough guys that used to do all that stuff. I know, because I grew up around loads of miners in North Yorkshire and West, all around there. My dad had a lot of mining towns that he used to go to. Good people. They really were, until, of course, they were sort of chewed up, along with the dockers in the 80s, courtesy of Margaret Thatcher and all that kind of stuff, to sap the strength, I would suggest, of the male population of Britain. But 400 years of coal, what does he mean by that? He means, obviously, that there's enough coal in there to fire all the coal-fired power stations to keep these islands in plentiful supply of electricity for 400 years. And everybody says, well, these are highly polluting, terrible things. No doubt, as they have evolved, they've been less polluting, but they've always been polluting. I admit that. Years ago, about 2004, 2005, maybe around about that period, so 20 years back now, I was in a whole series of discussions with a small group of inventors and technology people out in California. And I think most of them will have probably shuffled off this mortal coil by then, because they weren't spring chickens when I spoke to them. Most of them were in their mid to late 70s. So this is 20 years ago. So, and I lost connection with them probably about 12 years back for all sorts of reasons. We were looking at things, and they had all sorts of technical designs for generating power and electricity. But they had one which always really got my attention because it seemed to be so simple. They had developed a fluid that was extremely inexpensive to put together, a chemical fluid, which could be sprayed on the coke or the coal. I suppose most of them use coke, don't they, in these power stations, or did. And it reduced the pollution. This coating that they put on the coal would reduce the pollution coming out of the smokestack by 95%. In other words, barely negligible what was taking place. And we've got 400 years worth of coal in the ground. That's in Wales, where I come from, up in near Selby. There's a place called Selby in Yorkshire. There's apparently one of Europe's largest coal mining seams there. It's enormous. I know, because my brother-in-law was banging on about it, because he had a lot of connections with the mining community as well. And this thing stretches out into the North Sea. It's that big. It's probably hundreds, if not thousands of years of power. And I guess anybody who's a green sort of person is saying, Paul, that's such a filthy solution. It's disgusting. I doubt it. I suspect that because of lack of investment, or a lack of, it doesn't suit people's political agendas, it's not been fully exploited. But Paul, I don't know if you're aware, I'm assuming you are, and possibly many of the listeners are aware as well, there is literally 0 point us shutting down our coal-fired power stations, not that this will ever be pointed out to anybody, because over the last 5 years, the Chinese have built 280 of them. So what is the point? What is the point of Europe and America shutting these things down, while China and India, no doubt, don't give a flying monkeys about it? And they're right to not give a flying monkeys about it. Where are they going to get their power from?
Right.
You know?
Well, I don't know what the U.S. is planning on doing. Maybe they're planning on replacing it with wind, which those what the wind turbines, they cost $5 million, and they last about 20 years, and then they're junk and they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
Or solar panels, about the same thing. Their payback is 20 years. Usually by 10 to 15 years, they're broken and need to be replaced. And also, they still have to keep some kind of a power plant spun up, ready to step in, because wind and solar is unreliable. It cannot feed the grid with 100% reliability. So they have to have a power plant idling, essentially doing nothing, just in the event a cloud comes over or the wind dies down. It's ludicrous. Absolutely insane.
Well, it's not based on creating pragmatic solutions that we can all understand and benefit from, is it? It's actually about creating an environment in which the powers that would be can acquire more power. They keep making out there's a problem, there is, but it's not the one that they make out. They say, well, there's a problem with all this stuff and you need us to resolve it. This is in every sphere of all the areas that we look at. We're facing a sort of interconnected, long-standing protection racket. We're the government. We're going to sort out the power for you. No, hang on just a minute. Say intelligent men like you and me sat at the back of the room drinking a pint, maybe even smoking a pipe so that we really look intelligent, I don't think that adds up. I'm saying this in this mythical cafe that we're all in that never ever is going to happen, and we're never going to get to talk to these people in this particular way. But this is obviously what's taking place. There's nothing wrong with using the coal. I mean, I've mentioned here before, there's a guy up in Alaska. You've got a gas field, and I think there's oil up there as well, that is so vast it would keep you going for 500 years. That's with all the forecasts of the growth of the population and everything. It's absolutely enormous. Right. And it was discovered in about 1974. And there's a reverend, and I've forgotten his name now, or a pastor, something Williams maybe, I can't remember. He died recently. Very interesting guy. I didn't agree with everything he said, but he said some wonderful things. And what happened was that when they were putting those pipelines in Alaska at that time, they had a very high incidence of suicide. An abnormally high one. These were guys that were away from their families for an awful long time, working in very tough conditions, and it was arduous, very cold work, I guess very dark throughout the winter, just unpleasant, generally unpleasant. And they'd had a team of psychiatrists, oh yeah, they were probably causing it all, a team of psychiatrists who were getting nowhere. So in desperation, the management called him in. Lindsay Williams, there you go, I knew the name would pop into my head if I told the story.
Lindsay Williams.
Yeah, and I think
That's who it was.
He left us a couple of years ago, I think it was. He tells, I ought to dig the clip out for a future show. He tells this story of what happened, and they brought him in. They said, look, we're having a terrible time, and maybe you can minister to them and bring some meaning into their life spiritually to give them something to focus on. Come over here and be a pastor, basically. So he did, and he was very effective, because he led them back to have a bigger view of life, and the incidence of suicide dropped massively. I'm not saying he limited it completely. Maybe he did. I don't know. But the management, basically, because he was so effective, fell in love with him. They said, you're great. You can stick around, okay? And so he was there for quite a few years, organising all this, I guess, zooming up and down pipelines and stopping off with little crews and whatever he had to do. He said that, I think it was 1974, and was that the year of the oil crisis? I know we had lots of petrol queues over here. Was it 74 or 75? It was around about that time, wasn't it? Did you have it over there? You must have. When gas, as you would call it.
Yeah, in the mid 70s, we had the lines around the block waiting for gas.
Yeah,
and all that.
We had them here. Yeah, as I remember the other week, I was telling about my petrol station story. So I came into it after that, but. He went into the office one day, 74 is the year I've got, but I might not be exactly right, but early 70s, and there was much jubilation and the popping of champagne corks, literally, I think, in the office. They were beside themselves. And so it took him a little while to find out what was going on because everybody was so excited. But they said, look, we've checked it. We've been checking this for 6 months or whatever it was. We've plodded most of it. We've come across this colossal oil and gas field that is so big, it makes America energy independent, for a long, long time, a huge time. So they were overjoyed. They thought they were going to be able to make an announcement about this, and it was going to be a great contribution to the US economy, which no doubt it still could be. But what happened was, he said about 5 days after that, the archetypical helicopters flew in with the men in black or whatever they were, but these guys turned up. And they had a series of meetings, and when they left, all the management team's faces were as if they'd been slapped with a wet fish. They were in incredibly bad mood, and they were dispirited and depressed. And what they'd been told was that they were not going to be able to extract all that energy from this field that they'd spent so long identifying and cataloguing and detailing. And there's all sorts of reasons for it. But mainly, I would suggest the main reason coming back to my hobby horse, but then it's not mine, it's everybody's, they just don't know it yet, is that it comes back to the bank. And Henry Kissinger had been shooting around in the 60s talking to all these rich Arab oil countries and wanted them obviously to trade in US dollars, which they did, obviously. I mean, that's what Saddam Hussein, really got into trouble for, was wanting to switch trading over to the euro or whatever he was about to do. They didn't like that at all. And there was a kind of very loose deal on the table. Well, it's loose in my mind. It's probably very precise in real terms. But Kissinger had said to them, look, we're America. We make lots of great stuff. They went, yeah, you do. We've got manufacturing capacity. We can make all sorts of things. And what we want you to do is we want you to sell all the oil in dollars. And but the oil that we buy off you, we want you to use the money that we give you for your oil to buy American goods and services. You see, you have it both ways. They went, yeah, all right. They probably didn't have too much of a choice, you see. So it's one of those sort of negotiation tactics that you can't really get out of. Anyway, everybody seemed to be reasonably happy. But what that did was it underpinned the price or the stability of the US dollar on the world's exchanges. And, drilling for oil is quite expensive and all this, that, and the other. And they were quite happy to pay for it for those reasons. Now, if you've got that stuff in your own backyard and you already own it, you don't need to go off and buy all this oil from the Middle East, do you? And they didn't want you to do that. The controllers didn't want that. They don't want people to be independently strong under their own energy base. They want you to be interdependent. That word cropped up in the 90s. I think there were books written about it. Interdependence is the new way. No, it isn't. It's never been the way. It's the way of the global communist control grid. It's to get all these nations like in a domino line, reliant upon someone else so that you can threaten them at the point of exchange. That's what it's all about. Well, how can you be threatened if you say, well, we don't need anything you've got? What do you mean? Well, we can manufacture everything we need. We make so much food, we don't need that. And we've got all the power we need for the next 500 years. Bye. How do you get in and tell those people they've got a problem? You haven't got one. You haven't got
it's
any
the king's oil.
Yeah.
It's the king's oil, like the king's deer and the king's fish. And it's not yours. It belongs to somebody, not you. And if you buy property, you only purchase the right to dwell on the surface and within any buildings on the property. You don't own the land. You don't get a lodial title or title in a lodium. So you don't get the water rights. You don't get the mineral rights. You don't get the airspace. All you get is the right to dwell on the surface, and you can continue to do that as long as you continue to pay your taxes. And if you stop that, they walk you out the door.
They do.
My house.
They do. It's just this massive protection.
They own everything.
You've led me to something else by talking about a lodial title as well, where did I see this? I don't know where I heard this. I just bought this book the other day because I read about it somewhere. It's called Who Owns England? The Sunday Times bestseller. I believe the author is slightly a bit of a lefty, but I don't really mind. It's a very good book, the bit that I've read so far. The subhead to it is really interesting. It says, How We Lost Our Land. This is with reference to, obviously, the people of England, and how to take it back. Now, that bit will be at the end of the book. So if I get to the end of the book in the next few weeks, I'll do a sort of rundown on it. The author's got a great name, though, for talking about land. He's called Guy Shrubsole. Shrubsole. Guy Shrubsole. And it's very interesting what he says. Now, I just wanted to read you a little bit here about the measurement of the land in England. So many people may well know that we were invaded, boo, we're still cross about it, by the Normans in 1066. And that was pretty bad. And what happened was about 30 years after that, they put together the Doomsday Book, which was basically, as far as I'm aware, the world's first sort of national tax database to get us all sort of find out what we owed and make sure that some people didn't have too much, it's too much for their own good, and the king needed it, and this, that, and the other. It took another 800 years before the next survey of the land was done. 800, right? Because the resistance from the hidden lords and hidden owners of the land was considerable. And of course, they had a lot of power, and they were able to influence the part of the governments of the day. But on page 30 of this book, in the paperback version anyway, I want to read you this paragraph, just about this sort of catching up. He says, "It fell to an author and country squire, John Bateman, to interpret and popularise the return, that is, the return of the statistics on the land." They'd done a measurement. He said, in 1876, he published the Acreocracy, so not a democracy, but the acreocracy, I suppose the power of those that own the acres of England, in which he summarised the owners of 3,000 acres and above. It became a bestseller, going through 4 editions and updates, which culminated in Bateman's last work on the subject in 1883. The Great Landowners of Great Britain and Ireland, it was called. Bateman's analysis, this is the key bit that it's leading up to, confirmed the radicals' worst fears. Just 4,000 families owned over half the country. Meanwhile, 95% of the population owned nothing at all. The landed elite had been exposed. I want you to think about that. So the population in England at the time, I can't remember what it was, 8 million or something. I mean, he's got a figure later on. It wasn't that huge. You know, it's really, probably not even 8 million back then. 4,000 families owned half the country. Half of it. It's absolutely astonishing.
What was the title of that book?
The one that I'm reading. It's called Who Owns England? By Guy Shrubsole. It's relatively new. I think it is. Last few years, something like that. I stumbled across it. Oh, yeah, because I was reading an article about farming. I want to come around to farming as well. Obviously, to farm, it turns out you need a bit of land to do that, don't you? And
oh, yes.
Yeah, it's quite important. It turns out as well. He's also trying to find out something about... I wonder if I can read this bit. He mentions an Italian count. Of course, I want to take the O out of that. I probably won't be able to find it now. I'd marked up page 30, really, for the show here, so I've got a marking on it. Where is this one as well? It's a thing to do with ground rents, okay. He traces a thing, the ownership of certain pieces of land. And here, I found it. Look at that. You see? My fingers are actually working. Let me redo this little bit. He said, one of the biggest owners of ground rent properties. So there's 2 types of rent. You lease a thing, right, the building. Then there's the thing called ground rent on top of that. I know this all seems tedious, and it is in a way, but it's through these tedious manipulations they get hold of you and run everything into the ground. One of the biggest owners of ground rent properties in England is Wallace Estates. They are owned by the Wallace Partnership Group Limited, who in turn are owned by Albanwise Limited. But who owns Albanwise? Thanks to Companies House publishing Persons of Significant Control, now this is the thing that's only happened recently, we now know a mysterious Italian billionaire called Count Paduli. Who is this guy? Count Paduli, who also owns a 4,500-acre estate in Norfolk. His country of residence, however, is stated to be the tax haven of Guernsey. So this is part and parcel, really, of all of these sort of control systems that we're up against. But the control of the land and the ownership of it, I was gobsmacked when I read that. 4,000 families. I mean, there's 4,000 families within about 100 yards of me. And it turns out that none of them own any land at all, which is what a pity.
Right.
Quite a thing, huh?
Yes, you will. People thought that when Klaus Schwab said, you will own nothing and you will be happy, that he was prognosticating the future. No, he was saying the way it's been for 200 years. Mm-hmm. Oh, you own nothing and you don't know it.
Yeah. That's really it. And even that word, the land registry, we don't want a land registry because that means the Crown owns it. We want a land record book, don't we? We just want it recording.
That's right.
We just want it we don't want anything registering. Mm-hmm. We're not assigning ownership of anything over to somebody who says, I'm your king. And maybe, as we know in the past, kings were, just the big guy in the tribe. Yeah, you don't want to go up against him because he's 6'4", he weighs twice as much as you, and he'll break your neck. Okay, got it. He's in charge. Yeah, understand. Very, very straightforward. But a couple of millennia later, we've got this situation, and of course it's all intertwined with all of this control, all of this use of the land. Even, as well, in the early part of the book, although I didn't really mark this, there are quotes from Churchill which are actually completely honourable and good and sound. This is before he got rotted out. I don't know when the rot started with him, but I assume early 1920s, because he wrote the article in the Evening Press or the London Evening News, whatever it was, about Zionism or about communism. I think that was about 1920. And you could see from that article that he still had his head screwed on right at that point. But during the 20s, he really lost it big time, as we all well know. That's my view. A lot of people would disagree. But at this point, he's talking about the owners of land. And what he really says is, there's something not right here, because the guys that own land, they just sit there owning it. And then somebody, through hard work and sweat, builds up the town, builds up the commercial space. And as they do that, the rent value of their land nearby just goes up, and they didn't lift a finger for it. So, yeah, not that I'm into the idea of punitive taxes on anybody, but the idea that 4,000 families owned half the country and 95% owned nothing. Bit of a problem, right? Bit of a problem.
Yes, quite.
It seems to me that it is.
They have beneficial ownership. They don't have allodial ownership.
Yes.
And register, regis, it all has to do with transferring ownership over to the king. Ownership and title in allodium over to the king, to your sovereign, as it were, your master. When you register your car, you register your title deed for your property. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
And
it is.
If people
Maybe,
only knew,
Paul, now that you brought the word up, you could let us know what allodial title is.
Allodial title is everything above, as above, so below. The air, the land, the soil, the minerals, the water that flows through it. You own everything. Nobody can take it from you. You pay no taxes on it. Nobody can come on your land. It is your own private sovereign country. And anybody invades your space, I would guess the rules of invasion and engagement apply. You can defend your land in any manner you choose. So that is what a allodial title is.
And is that the thing that most of us don't have? We have something else that we think gives all that, but it's not a allodial title. We've got something else, don't we?
Right. No, we have beneficial title.
Ooh, is it beneficial?
We have the right to benefit from it, but we don't own it. No. And if you think you own your property, just try not paying your property taxes. You'll find out very quickly who owns it. Very quick. Because they'll sell it. Somebody will sell it, your property, your possession. They will sell it right on the courthouse steps. And you got to move.
Yeah.
And title transfer, allodial title transfer is through inheritance. So allodial title goes all the way back to God. God, we received the land as an inheritance from God, from the Creator. Okay. And they have put this little caveat in between us and our Creator, and we never turned back, I guess.
No, we've kind of accepted it because we've always been on the receiving end of bullying, or maybe our own intellectual sloth, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to dump it all on us, but we've obviously played a role in allowing these situations to happen. But of course, they work so very slowly, just as they're doing right now. You know, this incremental reduction of freedoms that we're all having to deal with, and that everybody senses is going on, and yet still haven't found a way to punch them in the nose, as it were, and give them a bloody nose and say, back off. I keep thinking about ways to do that. You know, I'm using it as a metaphor, of course, Paul. I don't mean literally to smack them in the teeth with my fist, although, you know, the thought does occur from time to time. Not that it would do too much good. I just end up getting locked up. But, you know, it's
Or
healthy
we've given it
response.
up. We've given it up in exchange for insignificant benefits and things we don't even need.
Yep.
Okay, if you receive the benefit, you owe the duty, right? Well, let's just look at it this way. The only free ride is the rotation of the Earth, and the flat earthers messed that up. So if you
I don't want
if
to
they
go
have
there.
their
I
hand
love-
out
I-
giving you
some of my best friends are flat earthers, and I don't bang on about it. They are. I don't mind. I find it really quite interesting. I know. Can you see how it's just it's such a fantastic divide and conquer topic? It's brilliant, you know. It's really good because some of the questions that people that subscribe to the flat Earth thing come up with are brilliant. And I'm a flat Earth questioner. I like the questions. I'm not so convinced yet about any supposed conclusions, but some of the questions are absolutely brilliant, and they really do get you thinking. Of course, the argument that you've probably received in your logo is, well, this just shows you how much they're deceiving you. I'm going, I kind of knew that already. You know, I don't need any more evidence on that score. This just, I'm swimming in it most of my life, you know, so it's okay. I don't care what
Warren in the
is.
chat says Earth is
Yeah.
or Warren in the Rumble chat, Earth is stationary and motionless.
Yeah. Well, I agree with him, Paul, you see. See how I stand in the middle like some diplomatic oaf, but I do. I actually
Exactly.
I mentioned him before. I've got to get him on. This guy that I know that's in the 80s. I've got to get him on in the next few weeks if I can do it. He's a guy that was trained in all sorts of extremely strange things, particularly with regards to killing people. I mean that, right? Because he worked in the British military and he was trained in a specific way. And when I talked to him, not about flat Earth or anything like that, we were just talking, because he's also a pilot. Even in his 80s, he still gets in the plane every now and again and zooms around. I said, is it flat? One day when I was talking to him, he said, no. He said, it's round. He said, but it doesn't spin. And I went, that's my position. I'm staying there. I like that one. That's good. I like of course, the next question is, what, you mean that the sun are all going around us? Yep. Yep. And then they said, well, I've got some questions to ask you. I said, well, I'm terribly sorry. I've got toast to put in my toaster and there are things to do. I can't enter. I'm not equipped to actually have the conversation at any sensible level at all. I just got on sort of what feels right. It's a bit naughty of me to do it. I accept that, but there is something wonderful about the idea of it not spinning. I quite like that. I've never really the idea that, you know, this is why you get these tranquil days. If we've got these tranquil days and we're spinning at 24,000 miles an hour or something, well, at the equator you are, apparently, but not where we are. It is interesting. You know, what happens if you actually stand on the North Pole? You just go round. You stand at 360 degrees in 24 hours and you don't feel any inertial forces. Of course, the idea is that if you're on the equator, you're going to get thrown off. Oh, look, you see, you've drawn me into this, you bugger. Now I'm talking about it. It's ridiculous. The North Star never moves. Yeah, Warren, I'm not on one camp or another. There's a lot of conundrums about the way things have been explained to us. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. Although you need a rocket. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that. And I had a friend who's banged on about it. He got quite insistent about it. I said, look, Tony, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Save up, build your own rocket, go up, have a look, shoot some footage. You come back, you tell me. I'll trust whatever you say. Right? You do that. So I know I'm being a bit farcical when I say things like that, but, you know, you've got to do that. I'm going to play a tune here. Now, this is not a B mix. You're going to get very cross with me, but I heard this the other day. I've never heard it before in my life, and it's extremely odd. Now, I'm not even going to tell you what it is because it's just so bizarre, this. I'll tell you what it is afterwards. You're here listening to Paul English Live on WBN 324. We're here every Thursday at, cough, cough, 3 p.m. US Eastern Time, 8 p.m. In the UK. We're now all back in harmony, clocks-wise, flat Earth, globe Earth, non-spinning Earth aside. Everything seems to be okay with the clocks. Okay, so at least that's one thing that works a bit for now. I'm going to play that. This is like something really strange, this. It starts off as one thing and it goes into something else. And I guess the question may be, guess the year. And if anybody's ever heard this before, I'll eat my hat, and I'm not wearing one. Here we go.
Attention all listeners, are you seeking uninterrupted access to WBN 324 Talk Radio despite incoming censorship hurdles? Well, it's a breeze. Just grab and download Opera Browser, then type in WBN324.zil and stay tuned for unfiltered discussions around the clock. That's WBN324.zil.
The views, opinions and content of the show hosts and their guests appearing on the World Broadcasting Network are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of its owners, partners and other hosts or this network. Thank you for listening to WBN 324 Talk Radio.
Hi and welcome back to part 2, hour 2, just gone 9 o'clock here in the UK, therefore just gone 4 o'clock in the US on the Eastern time zone. Now, okay, anybody know who composed that wacky piece of music? Wacky, wasn't it, don't you think? What do you think about that, Paul?
What on earth was it?
I know. Where did that come from?
Good grief.
I know. I've got Spotify, right? And it just, I've been listening to certain cheesy Hammond organ, big brass band sort of 1960s, early 1970s groovy TV type music. I must be getting very nostalgic, right? So I think it all got kicked off. I kept on listening to the Avengers theme with Emma Peel, and Steed and all that kind of stuff, which is a fantastic bit of music. And it just sort of suggests things. This came up the other day. I went, what on earth is that? And I'm assuming nobody will have a clue who the composer was, or even what it's called, or what year it came out in, or the name of the people that made the sandwiches at the recording session. Anybody got any idea who this person is? No, I can tell, Paul, you're waiting with bated breath, aren't you? So it's his name is Janko. He's still alive, actually. Janko Nilovic, Nilovic. Janko Nilovic, and that's called Ballet dans l'espace. And I think he's Albanian and part Martian, because that was just incredible. Wasn't that incredible? Hey?
Albanian and part Martian.
Something like. And don't say you don't get interesting, original, and sometimes tiresome music on this show. That's why I didn't want to put you to the chore of having. You might want to. It might have taken you. I can't stop listening to it because it's that bass sound when it comes in. It's so wonderful, and I'm going, what is this about? What's it supposed to be for? It's like somebody in the 60s on an acid trip or something that's going in and out of a concert hall where they're playing orchestral music and there's all this groovy stuff going on in the alley or something. It's whacked out completely. Brilliant bit of stuff. I think it's brilliant because it's just so bonkers. So there you go. Yeah. It wasn't Jethro Tull, says Rickingart. No, it wasn't. I'll tell you his name again. Janko Nilovic, Janko first name, surname, Nilovic, ballet dans l'espace. I don't know how to name it in French. They have a different word for everything. What does that mean? Space ballet. Ballet in space, I guess. That's what it means. So there you go. I wish I'd not played that, Paul. It seems to have sort of completely put you into shock or something.
Well, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Do you want to get back to something serious now?
Well, you could have sent it to me. If I would have known that it was coming, you could have sent it to me and I could have remixed it and sent it
I was
back.
too busy running around finding Paul Harvey clips and having to threaten my sons and hurl pieces of wood at dogs in the street. I've just had a very busy day today. It's just had a lot going on. So, but yeah, well, we can do it. It can be a retro B mix later on. I think I'm going to have to play that one again. It's so good, it almost like needs to be the theme music for the show. But I'm told I can never ever change that now. We've got what we've got, which I quite like. But yeah, there we go. Fantastic stuff. Now, where were we? There was the Earth that managed to get in there, and what shape it is, and all that kind of stuff, which is not very interesting. But yeah, just coming back to this land thing, or moving it through. So, as you are well aware, as everyone listening is probably well aware, there is a war going on against farmers, which basically means a war going on against us, doesn't it? Because as far as I've figured out, we have to eat, don't we? We have to.
Yes.
We've got to do that eating thing. And there's never, ever been a problem with farming. In fact, you would say, quite simply, it's one of the great, massive contributions that Western Christian culture has made to the world. It's actually off the charts what they're able to do, even though I know they've been interfering it with agrochemicals and buggering about with the soil, which is also part of the long-term attack upon us, to weaponize the technology that we've created so that it poisons us very slowly in all sorts of different ways. I came across an article on there's a wonderful website, actually. If anybody in the UK wants to go there regularly, it doesn't sound that enchanting, but there's some fantastic articles on this. It's conservativewoman.co.uk. Yeah, conservativewoman.co.uk. And this is an article from April the 1st, so the new year. A Sinister Agenda Down on the Farm by Sally Beck, who's been reporting on these things for a long time. I'm not going to read the whole article. It's about a 10-minute read, and it'll sort of... but I've marked up the beginning is really worth reading, a couple of bits in the beginning. And this is the thing that had the link through to the book that I was reading from, Who Owns England. I just immediately bought a copy from reading this. She says, or writes, farming in England is facing a crisis as thousands of farmers have accepted government payments of up to £100,000 to leave their land. DEFRA, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, say that their lump sum exit scheme, there's a link to that. Of course, I won't qualify because I'm one of those 95% that doesn't own any land, launched in 2022 by the jolly good old decent Boris Johnson, aims to, quote, support farmers in England who wish to leave the industry. None of them, I suspect, or very, very few, wish to leave it, but they are being compelled to do so through the great economic squeeze. And she writes, it's been successful. Last month, DEFRA told me that they had received just over 2,200 eligible applications, nearly 2,500 farmers. Approved farmers who want to throw in the towel have until May the 31st of this year, 2024, to transfer their land. But there is no rule that says it must remain as farmland. Oh, I see. DEFRA said this, there's no rule. The scheme itself doesn't have any specific restrictions, they said, slyly, rolling their eyes. However, we expect that, I'm adding bits, right, because I'm like that. However, we expect that most of the surrendered land, will stay as agricultural land. We expect, do they? Earlier, they had said, in return for signing up to the scheme, farmers need to either rent out or sell their land or surrender their tenancy in order to create opportunities for new entrants and farmers wishing to expand their business. And she says expect is the key word, and it goes on in great detail. So there's links through, of course, to what we were talking about in the first hour. which is all to do with the environment. You see, this is just being used now as a roller coaster argument. Once you've had climate change go into you as being something really worthy of serious consideration, which of course it isn't. It's just like the sun rising on the flat earth. Oh, sorry, Paul. So it's just like, or whatever, wherever we live, it's just a thing that it's not really, it's a nothing burger because it's got to be there, otherwise everything else is off. But she writes, the result is a war of attrition against the farmer, as this net zero roadmap shows. So there's a net zero roadmap. We've got to get rid of all this stuff. And it comes from the Absolute Zero report, produced here in the UK by 6 of our universities: Cambridge, Oxford, Bath, Nottingham, Strathclyde and Imperial College, London, and funded by the Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, which is another government agency.
Oh, that's right. That's the report that was funded and written by Absolute Zeros.
That's right.
Oh, I know that one.
Hey, that's good. I like that. I might steal that from you. That's really, really good. Yeah, the Absolute Zero report written by Absolute Zeros. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They suggest drastic measures. I'm sort of telling this in a jovial way, but this is about as deadly serious a threat as we've ever faced, I feel. By 2029, so that's a mere 5 years from now, they aim to reduce beef and lamb consumption by 50%. Well, they won't be able to do that in my house, as my sons will be up in arms with pickaxes, anybody that gets between them and the beef. It says by 2030, they recommend that fertilizers are phased out. By 2050, all beef and lamb production should end. What? And energy used to cook and transport food should be reduced by 60%. Why? What for? What's the point? Oh, because climate change? Oh, all right then.
Yes.
So this is just another layer.
The carbon they're interested.
Yeah.
The carbon they want to reduce is you and me and everybody else that walks around.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's exactly right. So it's the traction.
How many millions of chickens?
There are
How many
60
millions of chickens have been destroyed in the United States?
I don't know, but I know how many there are in the
Because
world, apart from the ones just killed. Do you know
bird flu.
Do you know how many chickens there are on the planet? I know. I watched a chicken documentary. I remember things like this.
It's over 1 million of them have been killed because a few of them tested positive for bird flu. Yeah. There have been herds upon herds upon herds of cattle that have been destroyed because they supposedly tested positive for mad cow, and they're wiping out our food supply. When are people going to get it?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, brilliant. I love that. That's really, this is it. It's very simple. They're wiping out the food supply by lying to you and having these ninnies run around saying, climate change, we've got to save the climate. No, we don't. Not if it means killing me. I'm not interested in that at all. It's incredibly dense. Can't you come up with a better solution than that? Oh, brilliant, genius political types. Well, of course they can't, because they're mediocre. So, yeah, that's not very good, is it? It's very, very bad. Very, very, very bad. Do you know how many chickens there are in the world, by the way? Not that I know all their names or the exact number, but there or thereabouts, minus the ones that you've reported, and I've seen this over the last year or so, 15 billion chickens. We're outnumbered by chickens, basically 2 to 1, all of us. So there's some hope there, but these guys have got to be stopped. I mean, what's Gates been doing? Gates has been, this comes through to this land ownership gig. Again, you'll have something similar to the same sort of corrupt thing that we've got here. You'll have something similar. You know it better than me. I don't know the American situation, but I bet it's exactly the same. You may know something about it. I don't know. But Gates has been buying up stuff because he wants to have factory. Ooh. A voice from the ether or from the flat earth. Hi, welcome to the show. Who's that? Who is that? It's always like a disembodied
I'm not offended
voice.
by that.
No,
it's Sherry. Bill Gates is buying up the farmland. He is the number one farmland owner in America these days.
Yeah.
And I say China is running as second best. So.
Yeah, close second.
So you've got Specky Four Eyes and the Chinese buying up all the land. Yeah?
Right. And major chicken producers that have shifted gears from processed chicken meal to processed insect protein meal.
Yes.
One of our major chicken producers are now, they've opened a division doing insect protein.
There's no such thing. It's very poisonous for you, and we don't need to do that. The insects are part of God's engineering plan, which works. And these creatures that are coming up, these insects, like Gates, that are coming up with these plans, are basically not part of God's plan. And we've got to get rid of them.
Right.
That seems a little harsh. I don't know how I'm going to do it. As I said, I've got an egg beater here at home. It's about the only sort of thing I could wield with any great savagery and stuff like that. But something else is going to break. It's not really a war in that way. Yeah, sorry.
The only way I'm going to give anyone lead poisoning is with a pencil. It's so I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. There's some comments in the chat here that I'm reading, and I was aware of this. The UK was 80% food self-supporting in 1980. It is now 49% and dropping fast. Yeah, can believe that, Eric. That's because we're sort of immigrants to pick the veg. Yeah, this is true. Someone also writes, I'm just looking at the name, EXO. Apparently, we're about to face, here in the UK, a 50% reduction in lamb this year due to excess rain. I've seen this. They're talking about excess rain. I actually saw something as well with the land management organisation over here. A riverbank had burst its banks. It wouldn't have cost much to put it right, but they wouldn't put it right. And so 2,000 acres or something like that, 200 acres, whatever it is, was completely waterlogged. And the farmer was not happy, very cross about this, and said, basically, this land, that's 2.5 million loaves of bread lost. I suppose, and this is going on all over the place. So we've got, effectively, the disease that we've got is the sort of woodworm, as it were, in the bureaucracy. It's tunneled out either with morons or traitors or basically moronic traitors. It's probably a combination of all 10 or whatever it is, It's finding a way to actually create an alliance with farmers. I think we need to be doing this. I've got a list recently of local suppliers. I'm getting my eggs now direct from a farm. And I think we need to just go direct to the farmers and stand with them on their land. Whilst we still have got some land to stand on, we're going to have to find a way of connecting up with them. I mean, maybe many of them would resent it. I don't know. I don't know what the sort of cultural challenge is going to be, but it really needs to happen rapidly. We need to really get to grips with this because we, like you, have been trained to go to le supermarché, the supermarket. Everything is there. You don't need to see anything anymore. Whereas I remember when I was younger, my mum, there weren't supermarkets. They just didn't really exist. Not when I was really young. They started coming in the late 60s, convenience stores and things like this. But vegetables were bought from the greengrocers, and the meat was bought from the butchers, and all the bread was bought from the bakers and the buns. And they were better bread and buns back then when it was just a baker doing it full on. And it meant that all the housewives got to walk a lot more. So they were much fitter because they had to walk to several shops as opposed to just slob around in some great big sort of shopping mall or whatever, getting everything that they wanted to get. So we've been trained away, have we not, from being a little bit more resilient and hands-on and bloody, I dare say. My mum was often chopping through livers and kidneys and things like that. There was blood in the kitchen and stuff. And it was just normal. You got to get to grips with it. Now, most of us, I include myself, go, I can't kill a chicken. Have you ever killed a chicken?
Well, there was also a lot less produce out in the backyard.
Mm.
Everybody had gardens. Not everybody, but at least a few people on every block had gardens, and they would share the surplus from their gardens, which was significant most of the time, with all of their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff never had to come from the store.
Mm. I mean, jumping back into this little article, Paul, there's a chap over here called Jeremy Clarkson. You may know of him. He's really famous as a TV personality of a show called Top Gear, which is not about drugs. It's actually about motoring. He's a sort of motoring journalist, and he's very witty and funny, and was part of this little crew that became sort of a bit of a national institution over here for their scathing and satirical mockery of government regulations on motoring, and rightly so. Anyway, he's been he's become a farmer recently, and they've been doing a TV series about it called Clarkson's Farm, which is fantastic. It's very entertaining, and all his challenges with the local authorities when he wants to put up a sort of farm shop to sell local produce, and people sniffing, oh, you can't do that, and all the sheer difficulty of just trying to get something done. But there's a little quote from him here. She writes, many farms are already struggling. Celebrity farmer Jeremy Clarkson says, I don't know how anyone can make farming pay. I genuinely haven't got a clue. Last week, it says, Farmers Weekly reported that a Kent farmer had given up his dairy herd despite celebrating 100 years of heritage on the family farm last year. The unnamed farmer said, I'm losing money fairly rapidly on the low milk prices. I'm a cattle farmer, I love my cattle, and I've spent the last 30 years on the farm trying to sustain the dairy side of things. The milk price means that there's not the money to invest back into the farm needed for infrastructure and improvements. I've been told for a long time to get rid of the cows because storing cars and caravans on the farm will be more profitable. How is that allowable, he says. So this is the idea, all these arguments that are being mustered, that I am inadvertently presenting back. We're sort of training ourselves to accept in an indirect way the nonsense and guff that these idiots are putting out. And we have no way of literally, figuratively giving them a bloody nose. How are we to arrest their behaviour, these people who say they're in charge? It's got to be, arrested. They've got to stop. They need to be, sectioned. I really believe they have to be sectioned. But it's easy for me to just trot that sentence out. How we apply that and do it and gain some actual genuine sort of unified, I don't like that word either, but you get my drift, power to stop them doing this stuff. Because the main thing that's missing, you and I are talking about, any normal person can see what's going on, yet in the broadsheets, on the television, in the news systems, in the communications that come out of the orifices of politicians, they don't talk about this at all, just like they didn't talk about COVID properly at all. This is a sort of muted, totally coerced and supine bunch of people who are either, maybe they're just under some threat. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being too kind to them. Maybe they just think that, what's the point of getting the money, Paul, if you can't buy a steak? What's the point? Mm-hmm. I've got all this money. That's great. Can you get a steak? I know we can't get that anymore, but we can eat insects. You're barking mad. We're not going to eat insects. I'm not eating those politicians. I refuse to eat those insect politicians. I'm not going to do it. Can't they eat themselves? What's the big problem?
Or 3D printed meat.
Oh, there's that thing in it.
3D printed meat. I'm wondering where they're getting the biomaterial to print the meat. What kind of meat is it?
What's the point of this? What is the point? It's to stress, in a way, that the only people that can solve our problems, all the solution to our problems is high tech. This is complete crap. It's total crap. Mm-hmm. We've got too much tech as it is. We've gone way past what we actually need. And, of course, these people in government are totally addicted to it. Worse than you and I, and I'm pretty bad. But I know that we've got too much of it. Way, way, way too much of that stuff. They just think, we can systemize everything. We don't need you to do that. Why would we need you to do that? I think I've mentioned here, that I often say we need to get back to slow checkouts in paying for goods and services. And I've mentioned this to some of the checkout ladies, and they go, oh, no, it'd be too much work. I'm going, good, you need to do more work. I want it to be slower. I said, do you know what we're missing? I said, all these high-speed queues, people don't have enough time to stand in a queue and either make friends or have an argument with someone. I said, that was the general hullabaloo of life. I liked it. I miss it a lot. Where everything's quiet. People are just speedily doing things, being efficient for no purpose whatsoever. There's literally, it's sucking the joy out of all these little small moments in life that make it up. It's always the small things that add all the beauty and the spontaneous laughter and all these things. You have to sort of really, go for it. I'm always talking to people just because I'm really aware of how little chat there is out in everything's quieter. I want it noisy again. Even English pubs are so quiet compared to what they used to be like. They used to be an absolute din hole. You had to shout just to get your order in. Maybe there are still some like that, I suppose, but they just seem to be focused on getting people as full of as much alcohol as fast as possible, and it's not really my sort of scene. That really, I don't do that sort of thing.
Right. Well, another thing that's missing, just because there aren't people standing in line and they're chatting about this, that, and the other thing, whether they're having an argument or whatever they're doing, there's a communication that isn't happening because of the proximity or the lack thereof. There's the verbal communication, there's the visual communication where you're actually looking at the expressions and body language of the person that you're communicating with. But there is also an etheric and a heart energy communication where you're actually interacting with that person, not only on a physical level, but a metaphysical level, an ethereal level. And that's just not happening because the people are standing in line and then they're going to their own little self-checkout and they're all standing there dealing with that and everything else. And then they're just taking their goodies and they're going. And the next time they plan to interact with a human being is by text message or Zoom call or whatever.
It's wretched.
People are herd animals.
Yeah, they are.
Yes. We're herd animals. We're supposed to be with our own. So
you're not a troublemaker, are you, Paul? You sound like a troublemaker to me.
I'm absolutely a troublemaker. I am all about upsetting the apple cart. That's me.
A couple of good little comments here in the chat. A quick shout out to Night and Day. Thanks very much for stopping by. He helps me a lot. Does Night and Day. Actually, I've not mentioned. I was on. You might not know. The flagship show for WBN is Ria Bowes' Sunday show. UK time, that's 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It flies by. It's 4 hours. That absolutely flies by. It fizzes, does that show. It's a fantastic way to spend a good chunk of your Sunday. Look at me saying all the right things, but I mean it. It's great. And anyway, I was on as a guest in the 4th hour. Sunday just gone, which was a lot of fun. Talked about quite a few things. We talked about this, which sparked me off and led me to going off and getting these books and all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, great to see you here, Night and Day. And also Eric has always putting in cracking little comments. Eric, this is good. Night and Day's commented on this. I'm just going to reading out. He writes, eating rabbits kept the population fed during World War II. They were plentiful. Soon after the war, they deliberately spread myxomatosis to stop people eating cheap meat. Can completely go for that, yes. Eric. It's highly likely. Absolutely. Nearly every so-called spontaneous outbreak of disease is some coordinated lab causing ructions in the system, non-stop, which is permanently interfered with by these goofballs. By the way, I don't like rabbit. Anybody like rabbit? My mum
they've gotten to the point where they're poisoning everything.
Yeah, well, these weren't the poisoned rabbit. I just went, I don't like that. I was about 8. So, come on, okay. It's nice. You love this. It's a bit of rabbit. My mum loved it. She thought it was great, but I couldn't get into it. So maybe I need to try it again.
They've poisoned everything. You cannot have a garden outside because it's being sprayed on by chemtrails. You can't have rabbits or chickens because they're literally dusting disease over people's flocks. And who gave them permission to do this? Who gave them the right to destroy people's food sources? They privately own them.
I don't know.
Doesn't make sense.
No.
How do we figure out who wrote the check to spray poison on a chicken coop or a flock of chickens or a herd of cattle? Who paid them? Who wrote the check to spray that? Because I want the one that sprayed it, and I want the one that paid for it, and I want them to pay for it. In the most loving way possible.
I know someone who used to sell lights to these big chicken farms, where they, nice guy, really good. And I was this is about 5 years ago, I was having a conversation with him, and lovely guy. And he said, I know the stories that they're all treated terribly. He said, and in some cases that's true. He said, but the vast majority of places that he goes to, he said, it's not the case. They don't have such a bad life. I mean, like I said, I don't know how good a life you can have when there's 15 billion of you. 15 billion chickens is a lot. I suppose Kentucky Fried Chicken don't have too much to worry about. Interestingly, on all these meat things, chickens are not mentioned yet. Why is that? So, you know, why is it that the lambs and
they're
the
coming.
cows have got to go? They're going to have a go at the chickens next, are they? You know?
Oh, they're coming. Well, chickens are also the most hormone-injected and tumor-rich meat that you could possibly eat. Eating chicken is actually extremely unhealthy. Extremely unhealthy. And that's why they're letting them be. They're letting them alone. Because people are eating them. They're going to take away the lean and the healthy meats, the grass-fed and grass-finished cattle and lamb. And
we're going to have to form an animal-human union, aren't we? And we're going to have to go and talk to the sheep and the cows and say, look, we're on your side up to the point that we need a cheeseburger. Then it's all bets are off. But at least you'll have a... I mean, you know, people say, well, it's a terrible life. I don't know how many domesticated are probably the most successful animals on the face of the earth. Because we've tended to them.
Well, the only way to grow your food, the only way to grow your food is going to be in a greenhouse if it's green. If it's green and you have to water it, it's going to be in a greenhouse, and it's going to be in a barn if it is actually a mammal and eats hay or whatever. And you're going to have to figure out a good way to get the hay so it hasn't been poisoned before your animals get to it.
We're going to have to create the Animal Protection League of a really hostile nature. I mean, the thing about the sheep as well, everybody's talking about the lamb. Obviously, I always felt bad about that. I remember we'd be driving along in the car. My mum would say, oh, look, it's lambing season. You know, we're driving around all this lovely countryside in Yorkshire with my kid and stuff. And, of course, the fields are just full of lambs. And she said, oh, it's a pity that we've got to eat them. I said, do we have to? She said, no, but they're very nice. And they are. They're very, very nice to eat, poor little things. But there you go. See, even I did it just then. Oh, very poor thing. But yeah, okay, roast lamb, count me in, you know, it's fantastic. But the problem with the
what we need
sheep
to do is figure out who's doing this.
Yeah,
we need to figure out who's doing this because these are crimes against humanity.
They are. We need to find a way to form a defense wall against it to start off with. And whilst we're in that wall, so that we can understand exactly who it is, where their power comes from, why people are obeying them, why it is that they say, I am an authority. We say, well, you're obviously insane, so you can't possibly be an authority. Although I'm going to be flippant here, I want to be, just to get this out of the way. One of the things as well with the sheep is, if they get rid of all the sheep, right, how am I going to get a sheepskin jacket when I'm an old guy? How are you going to get one of those? What's going to happen with all that wool?
Artificial.
No, I don't want that. I want the real thing. I want the real thing.
Yes,
I mentioned here before, you know, I worked in an oil factory where they boiled sheepskin. That's where the oil came from. It's not like an oil factory drilling a hole in the ground like in Alaska. Not that kind of thing. They used to boil sheepskin, and it gets this oil out of it. It comes out of the wool, this natural oil. And then they used to use that oil and blend it with other things to create waterproof jackets. And of course, if it's raining so much, as someone mentioned before, apparently we're only going to have half the lambs this year or whatever because it's been raining so much. I'll come to that in a second. There's another point about that. But if that's the case and it keeps raining, but we haven't got any sheep, then we can't wear raincoats to keep ourselves dry. We're all going to be wet. It's terrible. That's much more important. So,
right.
Yeah. And they've been putting
the
images been coming out recently of all this rain apparently that we've been having. Okay, so maybe we have, maybe we haven't. I keep thinking all the time that none of these, or very few of these events, either A, have to have happened at all, or B, probably don't happen at the scale and the terror-infused communication that they put across to us. It's the mere fact that it's just a never-ending stream of alarming stories, a bit like what Paul Harvey was saying, non-stop, right? That's what it's all about. It's the psychological pounding. So you say, well, have you really examined the facts? And of course, you and I are saying, well, how do we do that? Oh, no, we're just getting bombarded by slogans. Climate change, less carbon dioxide. You know, and as I played in that clip, there's not enough carbon dioxide. I love carbon dioxide. Trees love it. Let's get more of it. We need more carbon dioxide. Here where I live, off the coast, if it were light and I went down the end of the street, it's dark right now, I could see them at sea. There's a wind farm that they put in the sea. Geniuses, right? Absolute geniuses. And so it's destroyed the natural view over the sea. And when we first came here, these things weren't there. £1,400 million for something that will recharge 3 mobile phones in an hour. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. Where I live, it's very windy along the coast. At times, it's very, very windy. Of course, they have to turn them off because it's going to... So I think that the wind turbine thing is actually just a political gesture. It's a communications gesture. People see them and go, there's our government doing something good to produce power. And you go, I don't think so. Have you read this pamphlet about what a joke these things are? And they take, I mean, they don't they produce more CO2 to manufacture than they save? It's complete nonsense.
They do.
It's complete nonsense. And electric cars are crap.
Well,
they're absolute crap are electric cars. They're rubbish. They're battery cars. That's what they should be called. They're batteries. They're not electric cars at all.
And
you were mentioning something about that.
Once those lithium batteries wind up.
Yeah,
once the lithium batteries in the electric cars start, you can't recycle them. The only thing that you can do is get rid of them. It just seems to me that these guys are particularly adept at creating toxic waste. They do so with manufacturing and chemical processing. They do so with nuclear power generation, and they do so with lithium batteries and electric car manufacturing. The only thing these guys are good at is destroying the planet, and they are attacking us in order to save the planet. How ludicrous is that?
Yep, it's ludicrous. Our situation's ludicrous, isn't it? I suppose there's still a part of our communication there's a part of me still, it's very small now, I've just about extinguished it, which almost by trained reaction looks to authority figures to sort out the problem. Yeah? It's that Stockholm syndrome. Mm-hmm. People here, most of the people listening to this and in the chat have got rid of most of it, but I bet you've still got a residue every now and again. I do. I have to watch myself like a hawk to see if I think you're getting suckered again, step back, because there's more bilge coming out of the mouth of one of these people. It's just non-stop. And of course, because they've got such an agreement for their language, they all turn up in cars, don't they? Look at my suit. I'm this, I'm Sir that. And we'll talk like this. And everybody go, these people really must know what they're talking about. Well, they do. It's just they're talking about their interests. When they say, we are going to conquer climate change, what they mean is we are going to kill all the human beings that are getting in the way of our plans. And we're going to do it through climate change. There's always sort of, that little thing.
I was reading an account. I was reading an account earlier today, and I'm going to try and paraphrase this as much as I can. But whenever somebody has like an event or whatever, and they want a celebrity or a politician, a high caliber, high powered politician to be there, they actually get a specification of requirements. I forget what it's called, but they receive, first of all, what that artist requires, like a brand and quantity of bottled water, amenities or features in the green room, and things like that. Well, on some of those, if there is to be travel between like the home base and the venue, many of them specify that they need a private jet to go from their home base to the locality of the venue, but they must be delivered to the venue in an electric or hybrid car. So they're in their private jet burning thousands of gallons of fuel and literally destroying the planet. But as soon as they get in the view of somebody, they must be in an electric car. It's ridiculous.
Love them.
But
they're a gift to people like you and me.
And what about what about the Bilderberg meetings and all that, like the G20s and all that? I mean, here are these high-powered politicians and globalists that are getting together to make decisions to save the world and save all of us from ourselves. And what do? They all show up in private jets. They all show up in limousines with entourages and bodyguards in multiple vehicles. They're there to save the planet, but Joel Osteen has more planes than he can fit in his backyard. I mean, give me a break.
I know. Can somebody break his neck? These people Obviously, there's just something about the sheer
Right.
barefaced cheek enables them to get away with it, or so I think. I mean, I don't know quite what they think they're getting away with, but they do. They don't seem to sort of suffer any sort of penalties for this absolutely bizarre, ridiculous behaviour. Just, I mean, I've got a couple of clips here left. It kind of moves things a little bit. But it's about this. It's actually moved
I think
this.
we've been on the negative long enough.
Yeah. Well, this is still a bit negative as well. I don't know. I must have taken my negative tablets today as well. So we're not going to do anything positive. Let's just make it all miserable all the way through. It's not. I just think we have to talk about. I think we have to talk about it because we're still looking for that mechanism that's going to galvanize or make us more effective. Obviously we're going to talk about it. This makes us more effective, but I'm hungry for the next tool in the kit bag, whatever it may be. We've got to sort of come across that. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know which. You see, I probably labelled these wrong. Let me just have a look. Dum. I've got far too many clips here. That is. Let's listen to this one.
If your version of history is true, then why do you need to make sure nobody questions it? Why do you need to spend billions of dollars to make sure that foreign governments are telling your version of history? Why do you need to set up entire institutes to make sure that your version of history is written into the curriculum of school children in foreign countries? If your version of history is true, why do you feel the need to threaten, harass, and intimidate activists, journalists, and historians who deviate from your official narrative? Why do you need to push for laws that criminalize alternative interpretations of your history? Why is it that any deviation from your official narrative has to be labeled anti-Semitic and immediately dismissed? Why do you so desperately need to enlist the help of Western media to make sure that your version of history is the only one that gets told? If your version of history is true, then why do you need to slander anyone who questions it? Why must you go to such extraordinary lengths and trouble to codify your propaganda into guidebooks, textbooks, history books, and geography books? Why do you need to manipulate public opinion, suppress scholarly inquiry, and instill the fear of social and professional disaster into the minds of anyone who deviates from your narrative? If your version of history is true, then why are you so afraid of its ability to withstand public debate and scrutiny? If your version of history is true, then why do you need to hide from it?
Now, I'm betting most people have thought that here, who's thought a little bit about that. But that nails it in a minute, doesn't it? Why? I've said this before. You know, a question for us to ask is, am I allowed to question history? Yes. Really? Okay. Can I question this bit? Well, no, not that bit. Why? Well, we'd prefer if you don't, actually. Would you? Why is that? Just stick to the narrative, lad. I'd rather not. It's to the clink for you. I mean, that's basically the chain of events. We've had that recently with this dynamic has been in play with regards to Sam Melia up in Yorkshire, who many people will be aware has been in prison for 2 years for putting a sticker up on a lamppost that said it's okay to be white. I thought that was factually true, so he's not telling a lie. I feel okay, not as okay as I used to, I have to say. I'm a little bit concerned about things. But are we allowed to question history, Paul? They say we are, but it's just that when you start doing it, all these bad things start to happen, pretty much as he was cataloguing there. You get put under pressure. There are all sorts of, everybody else is warned off of being with you. Those people that are courageous enough to plough into these fields, and we've got it throughout history, who have questioned the orthodoxy of the day, generally it's not a very good story for them. And this tends to rightly put most people off going down those paths, it would seem to me.
Yeah, that is completely ridiculous. He was jailed for putting a sticker on a lamppost.
Yes. But this is part of that. This is part of them
ridiculous.
Bombarding us. This is part of these micro losses of freedom. They're shaving a bit off here, shaving a bit off there. Everybody goes, "Oh, it'll stop." It won't. We all know it's not going to stop. They're not going to stop. The food thing, of course, that we've been covering is just part of it. It's every single aspect of our own civilized procedures are becoming uncivilized because they're weaponizing our technologies and our organizations against us. The recipients of all the good brains of our forefathers down through the centuries is now, you're not allowed to have the benefit of that. That's for us. You've got to stay in your hole. as they seek to create, so we are told, a neo-feudalism, which does appear to be what they want. But they seem to be achieving it just through saying sentences. Why is anybody acting on this? It's not sound. So I include myself looking to try and find the right sorts of actions above and beyond just communicating like this, even though I love doing this kind of stuff. And there's much room for improvement in all these areas, and we can target things more precisely. But it's finding this other set of actions. Anyway, I thought that was pretty good. I've got to listen to this one. No, this is the other one. This is from Australia. I was like, this is a recent one, but it really addresses this control situation that we're under as well. This is, I don't have a name. I think she's an MP, if they have MPs, but a member of Parliament down there.
Labor and its allies, the Coalition and the Greens, have rushed 9 laws through the Senate today with no debate or scrutiny. No. And One Nation opposed all of them on this basis. One of them was horrifying consequences for our future and our freedom, the digital ID law. This law is designed to control the Australian people. It's a step towards the 15-minute cities already being imposed in the United Kingdom, heavily penalising anyone trying to travel outside their community. This is a secretive international effort to establish a one-world government with no freedom and no capacity for dissent. Let's never forget how easily Australian governments imposed restrictions on us during the pandemic. We couldn't go anywhere without a digital vaccination certificate. Our freedom of speech was suppressed by governments and by tech and continues on social media content still. I will call it out the way I see it, as I always have done. Digital ID is the first step towards these restrictions being imposed on us permanently. Last year, because I was a senator, I was not allowed to exchange Australian currency for euros or British pounds like every other Australian. UK political leader Nigel Farage had his bank account closed because activists disagreed with his views. He was debanked. All of your digital data will be owned by governments. You'll have no physical proof you own anything, including your home. And it is happening now and has for years. We've seen how insecure this data always is. There have been 9 breaches of Australia's personal data in March 2024 alone. Your new oppressors will tell you digital ID is your best interest, that it will make things easier, that it will protect you from bad people, and all it will cost is your freedom and right to privacy. As Klaus Schwab said, you'll own nothing.
And Senator O'Sullivan.
Probably
she's a
nothing.
Firecracker. I love her.
Yeah. I like fired up Australians. I like anybody fired up, don't you? We've got to
exactly.
We've got to get fired up. It's probably nothing new to the ears here, but I want to play it because it just adds another sound in the space and it just lends agreement to what we're talking about, and that's key. A couple of comments in that I'm just going to quote here as well. Night and Day talks about an electricity generator using wind from Spain. Looks like a woman's vibrator. Well, I have no idea what one of those would look like. I'm terribly sorry. I'm quite innocent, really. On steroids. And the shape is designed to oscillate when there's a breeze. Well, there we go. There we go. I actually do know what you mean, Night and Day, actually. I've seen it. It's a bit weird, but there you go. Anyway, never trust the Spanish with oscillating energy generators or something like that. Also, another comment from Aunt Sally here regarding Sam Melia that we were just mentioning a few minutes ago. She writes, Sam was jailed because a jury decided that he intended to cause racial hatred. He had a public archive of stickers for people to access and print, none of which were illegal. Absolutely true, Aunt Sally. It's an outrage what's happened to Sam. And I think even me saying that, I feel lame in saying it, but it is. And yet it's part of this process, like I was saying before, of the shaving away of one little freedom after another and the subduing of the spirit of our people. Not people like us. Our job is to, I would suggest, fan our fires and set everybody else on fire as fast as we can. But we've got to do it in some kind of structured way. Excuse me. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing over here, Paul. They're basically shutting down the mind. If we can't communicate if I can't use vulgar, rude words when I want to, and I want to use them, of course, all the time, particularly in the house, and be completely out of order in the house. But no doubt the smart TV in the house is monitoring me. I hope it is. I hope it is. They're going to have a lot of tapes to record through and stuff like that. But yeah, these are unhinged times, and we might be swinging around in the breeze, but we're closer to coming up with some path through than we've ever been before. So I want to be positive about that. I do feel that. The knowledge that we have is only the first step, because knowledge is not freedom. It's the application of the right bits of knowledge at the right time. And excuse me, that's really what we're facing right now, is to bring all these knowledge to, I mean, with what you do with Roger, you're applying it in the field of personal, let's call it liberty, but to get your status back in order so that you become or remove yourself from a hitherto unknown contract which you have with, supposedly, with your government or some powerful entity. That's Roger's pursuit, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that is necessary before people can actually come together and create a grand jury based on common law. You actually have to have access to the common law. So if you've accepted federal or government citizenship, then you no longer have access to anything but rights, privileges, immunities. They're not God-given rights. They're state-granted privileges, and they can be revoked at any time. And it's like the slaves trying to rise up against the lord of the manor. It doesn't happen. But if you return yourself to your God-given rights, then you can populate a citizen's grand jury, and you can actually indict these people. The only problem after that is finding somebody that will enforce the indictment.
It's a big club, and we're not in it, right? Finding those people to enforce it is the tricky thing. It is. It may be that most of the people that are in politics right now in this country possibly went in with good intentions. Not all of them. Some of them are not like that, but maybe many of them did. But by now, once they've been absorbed into that space, they become of no use. And it's ridiculous as well. I'm just full of cliches today. It's just one cliche after another. They all stand up, though. It's also, you may. Hi.
Hi. Torches, pitchforks, and egg beaters, if necessary.
Yeah.
That's how
look at what they did. Look at what they did with the county sheriffs. Okay, the county sheriff is an elected official. He is the keeper of law in the county. He is the final arbiter of right and wrong. And what do? Whenever a new sheriff gets elected, they get an all-expenses-paid trip to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks, where they are taught how to be a sheriff. Okay, so how can the corporate government of Washington, D.C. teach a sheriff how to address and protect the rights of the people? It doesn't happen.
No.
They drag them to Washington so they can get something on them, so they can twist and manipulate them and keep them in line. So,
yeah,
it's been said that it takes only 3 days to compromise anyone. Doesn't matter who it is. A new senator, new congressman, governor, mayor. It only takes 3 days for them to be able to compromise them and get something on them so they can twist and manipulate every day after that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Paul, may I ask you a question? Paul English.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, the people in America are being taught now that the Constitution, and it has its downfalls, for sure. Its loopholes, let's put it that way, for attorneys. What does the rest of the world think about it, and would they like one of their own? One for their own selves? Because what law you're living under we at least have a remedy.
Well,
so we're not using it.
Yes, but you're trying to use it, and you're in the way of doing it, and we have to encourage each other with that. I mean, my view of the Constitution is that, like all documents, it's probably flawed in some way, which you don't need to be a genius to say something like that, and I'm not. We sometimes over here think that we've got these things in place, and possibly we do, but not in an easily accessible format. I mean, for example, we've got a thing over here called the Bill of Rights, but I've read many things saying that this is it's another sort of honey trap, is the Bill of Rights. It's actually not quite what we want. We've got Magna Carta, which everybody quotes, but there have been bits removed from it in some of the recent versions, and of course it's not applied. So it becomes a dead document if it's not applied. This is the process of applying these things that's all perverted. We say we have courts, do we? Sam Melia went into something called a court. It doesn't appear to me that it operated like a court at all, or that the person who was acting as a judge did any judging. Something else was taking place. A political agenda was being enacted. So you go, well, we can't go to those places then and have open, decent, honourable communication. It's not taking place. And are all these people hijacked? It seems, Paul's just saying that it takes 3 days to get someone corrupted. Well, what are we to expect with a legal system in this country that's hundreds of years old? This is what Dickens railed against, very much. He railed against this. I've just about run out of time to play. In fact, I have, and we're going to overcook it here because we're going off air on WBN in about 2.5 minutes. And I wanted to get the Paul Harvey clip in. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to run it in halfway through on the radio here. There'll probably be a little overshoot here on Rumble after the show. So I'll stick it in there. Sorry about that, Paul. I've been looking to do it, but you keep asking interesting questions, and I got derailed a bit there without looking at the clock. Yeah. I don't know what other nations think about the U.S. Constitution. I can't really answer on that. I just always thought it's the history of how it came into being. That I'm interested, I suppose, in the States from 1776 to the onslaught of the war between the states. The period when things really were as close to a republic as you've ever had them. And, of course, it disappeared as far as I understand, with the war between the states. That's really what happened. So... yes, it's tricky to say exactly what the right steps forward are, but Roger's work, and we've probably got some parallels over here that we can follow. I know Roger's mentioned to me about status and what we need to look at, and I've mentioned here, but I've just been so busy the last 2 weeks. There's an organisation I'm aware of rooted in Ireland that appear to have made some serious headway with regards to getting people their liberties back, or at least not being encumbered by this bogus contract that people are just literally unaware of that's over them, which is, I'm finding simple ways to communicate that is the challenge that we're all facing. So there we go. Paul, thanks very much for being here with me tonight. You've been listening to the Paul English Live. I'm here every Thursday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. UK, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on WBN 324. We're also on Rumble and DLive. Thanks to everybody in the chat who's been making some cracking comments and fueling the conversation here. Love it. Thank you very much. Big shout out to all of you making the show spin through. So we're going to get off the air now with WBN. There'll be a little bit of silence, and then we'll carry on the chat over on Rumble. If you want to carry on listening, go to paulenglishlive.com, click on the Rumble link, and there'll be a bit of an overshoot on the show here. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in this week. Bye for now. And there we go. And we're off air with WBN, and we're still on Rumble a bit. So thanks, everybody, for sticking around on Rumble. And Paul, are you still there? Are you up for talking a little bit more? Anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're still on Global Voice, too.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So, yeah, thanks very much for hooking up and shooting that out there. I've had a very good, interesting technical trousers week with all sorts of little things going right and wrong. If anybody wants to join in the conversation, if you feel like you want to call in You can do. Best if you've got a headset, but we'll cope with you if you've got a bit of echo. Honest, I'm quite nice about that. If you head over to paulenglishlive.com, at the bottom you'll see a link in green that tells you where you can call when we're on air, and just call in if you want to. We're probably just going to talk here for a few minutes. I don't know. I'm trying to think of that Paul Harvey clip is so good. I think I ought to save it for next week and stick it in the show then. Really, I don't want to kind of waste it here. You know, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's okay.
You said you wanted to dig it up, and I had it conveniently located in my sound effects folder, so I just grabbed it and sent it to you.
I've heard it a few times. I've got so many tabs open with articles I could have gone through tonight, but we get onto a thing, and of course there's so much to talk about with it. I actually had a couple of poems to read out, but that's going to have to wait until next week. I think I'm quite into reading poems at the moment, so there's one that's worth reading, a couple of Kipling ones that are really relevant to our situation, but I'll keep that back for next week. What else was I going to say? I'm back on the Ria Bow show, not this Sunday, but a week on Sunday. It's normally once every 4 weeks for me. I've only been on a couple of times, but I've had a lot of fun there and some good conversations and just getting to know that whole scene. So that's been great, but not this coming Sunday, a week on Sunday. I'll announce it here again. I guess I should do these sorts of things. I feel a bit sort of awkward about it, a bit shy, you know, but I guess it's all part of promoting it and getting things across. So that's something to look forward to. Should be a lot of fun. Oh gosh, sorry about the cough. I guess I'm sort of all I'm all finished out here, Paul. If there's anything you'd like to talk, you prompt me or kick me in the shins with anything.
Well, let's see. Bateman. What was the rest of Bateman's name? What was his first name?
What, the guy that did the land registry
Remember
thing?
offhand?
Yeah, hang on. What I've got to do is I've got to pick up the book. I've got to turn my phone on, put the light on, the lamp on it. Hang on. I need page 30, because at least I remembered that. Let's have a look. I'll try and tell you. I mean, that's just a small bit from that entire section about land ownership, which is mind-blowing, actually. Mm-hmm. It was to me. And if I could find Churchill's quote. You know what? I'm a bit wet with books. I should really mark them up with biro and scribble all over them, but I find I can't do that. So let me have a look. John. First name John. He was an author and a country squire. Country squire. John Bateman. And he wrote, the book was The Acreocracy of 1876. 1876, The Acreocracy. And he discovered all this stuff. I mean, apparently they've been making quite a few inroads into releasing this information, but it tends to peter out, intentionally, no doubt. They don't want people knowing about these sorts of things, about who actually owns the land. I mean, I would have thought with modern technology, Paul, it would be possible for Google to come up with a land ownership map of the whole of the UK, so that you can click on any bit and find out who owns it. They probably don't want to do that. That's probably.
I'm sure they have that.
I'm sure they have it.
Come on. I'm sure they have that. It's just they have access to it. You don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Silly Paul. Yes, they have everything. You have nothing. Sees everything.
I mean, there's a little comment on from that little paragraph I read. It says, the return, that's the return of the statistics, was swiftly buried. This is the thing that Bateman had found. Because of its embarrassing findings. Landowners hated it, so I guess it was embarrassing for them, right? It was set upon by the Times of London, Tory in its politics, which declared that the legend of 30,000 landowners has been found to be as mythical as that of St. Ursula and her company of 10,000 virgins. That's quite nicely put by the Times, really. It was castigated by politicians such as the MP George Broderick, who criticised it for inaccuracies and double counting, even though these errors had been easily corrected by John Bateman in his summaries. radicals failed to fully capitalise on its findings, although a number of MPs stood in the 1885 election on a promise of 3 acres and a cow for landless farmers. Well, you can't have the cow now, that's got to go. The most they achieved in terms of policy was the 1887 Allotments Act. I'm beginning to sound like a politician here, aren't I? The moment passed, time moved on, and the return was forgotten. So it's interesting. Apparently, it's awkward. It's not. You don't bring it up in polite company who owns the land, but it's a key part of the whole problem. Because it is linked through to farmers. And if farmers are being seduced with large amounts of cash, but as I said, no cows, no steak, no amount of money in the world's going to get you one of those things. So it's obvious. Mm-hmm. It's obvious that it's all part of the warfare that's on us because they literally want us dead. So that's really it. That's it.
Right.
Okay.
It's interesting. The great landowners of Great Britain and Ireland.
Yeah.
From 1863, that is available. That is freely available.
Really? Shall I get a copy? Yeah. What are you reading there, Paul? Oh, yeah, I'm reading about land ownership in 1863.
Archive.org.
Really?
Archive.org has it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Downloadable. All 576 pages of it.
I guess I'd be interested in the current one. Apparently, it's getting quite close, all of this, but then we'll find out who actually owns the land.
It's John Bateman.
Yeah.
It's John Bateman from 1883.
Yeah.
It can't be more current if it's written by John Bateman. The guy is probably not living anymore.
He's probably still alive. He might be the long-lived Batemans of Upper Cleckheaton or whatever. No, he's obviously completely shuffled off this mortal coil, 1883. But yes.
Right. Yeah, yes, and I could see your point where you would like to see a more current version, but and I was just letting you know that I actually found the book that was referenced in that other book, which I also found. So, but okay, I dropped the link to it.
Cool.
In chat. So
great.
Yeah, and Skype. So there you go.
Well. Sorry, I've been wheezy all day. I've got the wheezy wunks for some reason. Part of the weather's been damp in the air, and I'm frail and old. My eyes are dim. No, not really. I feel quite lively most of the time, but just a bit wheezy at the moment. Paul, I'm going to wrap it up for today, I think. I've had a...
Yeah, it sounds like a plan. You better
I've had a slog of a day. I really have. I really enjoyed that. That was very loose as a goose. And learnt a few things from that, and I'm going to try and structure things even better going forward for more shows. I think we'll do that too. And I didn't talk about banking too much today, which was quite good. So I've got to can't talk about it all the time because it is a bit tedious. I actually was doing some recording today, and I was of a little essay written by someone who I won't mention at the moment, but I might feature it in a show. It's quite heavy, actually, but I really enjoyed recording it, and if anybody who knows about that has heard this, they'll know exactly what I'm referring to, by an American author, really about our plight, and I guess really about, setting our people on fire. This is the key thing. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that, and other times when I'm out of gas, I just need to hit the hay, and I've kind of hit one of those points. So I think we'll call it a night for tonight. Thanks very much for shipping the stream out to GVN. I've got lots of other little things to talk to you about, which can wait till tomorrow. I'll try and contact you tomorrow. If you've got a spare 35 seconds in your busy technical day, and we can talk about those things. But I like that today. Yeah,
we never ever talk for just 35 seconds, 35 minutes maybe, and that's the abbreviated conversations.
I know. So, okay, wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Oh, it's great. I just love it that you turned up and we're here. Thanks, Aunt Sally. Thanks for your comments as well, and for Night and Day. Thank you very much. And to Warren and Eric and everybody else. I've been watching things in EXO, and if I've left your name out, I don't mean anything bad by it. I'm just that's where we've got to today. The chat's been nice and lively. We've got things to do to keep building the show and improve it. And as I've said before, as my time frees up, I've still got quite a bit to do over the next month. I'm planning to go twice a week. That would probably be it full on. It just needs a bit more organising so we keep the shows fresh and on topics that I want to talk about. But that's what we're going to do. Topics even that you want us to talk about. And I do need to put out that invite for people to throw in a song. I should have done that today, but I've just had so many little tabs open, I forgot to do that. So my apologies, but we'll do that. So next week, if you rock up early and get a song request in, who knows, it might get produced live whilst the show is taking place, because Mr. B-Mix here is very good at that sort of thing. So, because you've got nothing to do, Paul, have you? Just twiddling your thumbs thinking, I've got nothing to do, really.
Nope.
No. Okay. I'm going to go out with a song, literally, and I'm going to end it at the end of this song.
No, piano. No, piano first.
Oh. Hey, that was good. That lended atmosphere to it, didn't it? That was good. I don't know if I've played this on the here before, but I'm going to sign you out with a song from Kevin Coyne, Love in Your Heart. See you all next week, everybody. But this is worth listening to. 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Here we go.
Bluebird, I'm with you wherever you fly or go. I'm feeling sleepy with this love, feeling the flow. Yes, there's love, love from your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. It's only love, love from your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I know that I was always crying. The sighing has disappeared. I found your little island so full of love, and I'm coming down to find love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I'm finding love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. Alright. I'm finding love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I'm finding love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I know that taking care of you is what I'll do. When I arrive, I'm coming. Let's be good friends. I love you so. Although we've never met, I know there's love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I know there's love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I know there's love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul. I know there's love, love in your heart, drifting right down, reaching my soul.